My name is Nadia Voss. I'm 36 years old. The day my marriage officially ended, my husband looked at me across a mahogany conference table on the 14th floor of an office building in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, and said 7 words I will carry for the rest of my life. His attorney, a man named Winston Farrow, had just finished reading aloud the list of my contributions to our 11-year marriage. Raised 2 children. Relocated twice for Derek's career. Managed the household. Maintained the social relationships his client work depended on. Coordinated the care of his aging mother for 14 months when her health declined. Winston read it the way you'd read a utilities bill, flatly, as if it were administrative paperwork with a known outcome. And then Derek leaned back in his leather chair, loosened the knot of his tie with one finger, and said, "She was a stay-at-home nobody. She contributed nothing of financial value to this household. Nothing." His attorney didn't flinch. My attorney, a woman named Margaret Okafor, wrote something on her yellow legal pad. I sat very still. I did not respond. I looked at the wall behind Derek's left shoulder, where a framed print of the Cumberland River at sunrise hung at a slightly crooked angle, and I counted the seconds that passed in silence after he said those words. There were 11. What Derek didn't know was that sitting in a private server in a data center in Brentwood, Tennessee, there were bank statements he had never seen. Statements attached to an account that bore my name, and only my name. Statements that Winston Farrow had subpoenaed 3 weeks earlier and would receive by certified mail in exactly 48 hours. This is that story. To understand what happened in that conference room, you need to understand the decade that came before it. And to understand that decade, you need to understand the Voss household and the particular quiet shape of the life inside it. I married Derek Voss in June of 2013. I was 25 years old, he was 34. We married in a garden ceremony at an estate property outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. 72 guests, a late afternoon reception, string lights wound through the oak trees overhead. I wore a dress I had sewn myself from a pattern I had altered 4 separate times until the bodice lay exactly as I wanted it to. Derek wore a slate gray suit tailored in Atlanta. He cried during the vows. I remember thinking, in that moment, that his crying was the most honest and unguarded thing I had ever seen from him. I held on to that image for many years. Longer than I should have. Derek Voss was 45 years old when we divorced. He had grown up in Clarksville, Tennessee, the only child of a widowed mother who worked in hospital administration and who raised him with a precise, constant awareness of how things appeared to other people. He had a finance degree from Vanderbilt, which was where we met, though we were not in the same program. I was completing a master's degree in communications with a concentration in digital marketing strategy. He was already working at a commercial real estate investment firm in Midtown Nashville, and he had the rehearsed confidence of a man who had studied the room carefully before he walked into it. He was deliberate, he was attentive in the early years, and he was interested in me in a way that felt, at the time, like being truly seen. I was not naive about men. I was simply young enough to mistake studied attention for genuine understanding of who I was. Derek's career advanced in a measured, steady line. By the time our daughter Cora was born in the spring of 2015, he was earning $140,000 a year as a senior associate at Meridian Capital Real Estate, a firm managing commercial portfolios across the Southeast. By the time our son Felix arrived in February of 2017, Derek had been promoted to Director of Acquisitions. His base salary was $192,000. Performance bonuses in a strong year brought the household to $235,000. I want to tell you something about Derek that is important to understanding the whole picture. He was not a monster. I want to be precise about this, because I think the stories we tell about the people who diminish us are more honest and more useful when they don't flatten those people into pure villains. Derek was ambitious and image-conscious and deeply, exhaustingly concerned with what things looked like from the outside. He was also, in certain moments, genuinely generous. He remembered the name of my childhood dog and asked about her when I mentioned her. He learned to cook 3 dishes specifically because I liked them. He showed up to every one of Cora's school events in the early years with attentiveness that looked from the outside like devotion. The difficulty with Derek was not that he lacked warmth. It was that his warmth was always conditional on something, on you not costing too much, on you not wanting too much, on you staying comfortably within the shape of the life he had designed and being visibly grateful for the design. I had been working as a digital content manager at a regional media company in Nashville when we married. I was good at it. Within 18 months of joining, I had grown their social media audience from 11,000 followers to 147,000. My manager at the time, a woman named Patricia Ellison, told me I had what she called a native instinct for visibility architecture, meaning I didn't just create content. I understood how to build the kind of content that draws people in, holds them, and makes them come back. I heard that phrase and I believed it about myself. I kept believing it, even through the years when no one else was asking me to prove it. When Cora was born, I took maternity leave. When Cora was 3 months old and I began preparing to return, Derek sat me down at the kitchen table of our house in the Green Hills neighborhood of Nashville and said, "I need you to think seriously about the math. 2 incomes versus quality childcare for a newborn, the mental and physical load on you, what we might lose if you're too stretched to be present at home." He did not say stay home. He presented it as a rational analysis with an obvious conclusion and waited for me to reach it. I reached it the way he wanted. I stayed home. And I want to be honest with you about something, because I think honesty is what makes these stories worth telling. There were years when I was genuinely at peace with that choice. The early years with Cora and then Felix were years I don't regret. I was present in a way that mattered to me deeply. Every first word, every pediatric appointment, every Halloween costume I made by hand, every school play I was in the front row for, the dinner parties that Derek needed for client entertainment were beautifully run, because I planned and sourced and cooked and managed the conversation arcs through each evening. Derek received compliments for them at work the following Monday. He accepted those compliments without clarification. But by the time Felix started kindergarten in August of 2022, something had shifted in the texture of my days. The children were in school from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. I had 7 hours a day that belonged to no one in particular, and I could feel the restlessness that builds in a trained professional mind when it has been given nothing to work on. It's a specific kind of restlessness, not laziness looking for something to do, a tool looking for something to build. It was also around this time that a pattern, which had always been present in my marriage, began to clarify itself with a new sharpness. Derek had always managed our money. This was, in the beginning, a practical arrangement. He had the finance background, he had the investment knowledge, but over the years, what had begun as a practical arrangement had become something else. Something that operated less like a partnership and more like an organizational chart, with Derek at the top and a very clear understanding of where everyone else fell. I want to give you 3 specific examples because I am not interested in vague characterizations. This was not a bad day or a difficult season. This was years of deliberately constructed architecture. In October of 2022, my college friend Serena came to Nashville from Portland for her 40th birthday. I wanted to take her to dinner at a restaurant on 5th and Broadway, somewhere that felt celebratory, not extravagant. The bill for the 2 of us, with a glass of champagne I ordered for her, came to $168. When I came home and Derek saw the charge on our joint card, he set his phone face down on the kitchen counter and turned to me and said, "Nadia, $168 for 2 people. That's not a responsible use of our money." He said, "our money," with a weight that was specific and intentional, not possessive, instructional, like a corrective hand on the back of a child who has not yet learned the rules properly. I paid him back from my personal spending cash, the cash he transferred to me on the 1st of each month, $300. He used the word allowance exactly once, by accident, in a conversation with his brother on the phone. He didn't notice he'd said it. I didn't tell him. The second example. In March of 2023, I told Derek I wanted to attend a 2-day professional development conference for digital marketing professionals in Atlanta. The registration was $425. Travel and one night in a hotel would have added approximately $300 more. Derek listened. He tilted his head in the particular way he had when he had already decided, and was preparing to explain his conclusion to me as if it were shared. "I don't see the ROI," he said. "You're not working, Nadia. What exactly are you going to do with it?" He said it without visible malice. That was the characteristic thing about Derek. He rarely said cruel things with cruelty. He said them with indifference, which is a different thing entirely. Indifference presents itself as reasonableness. It expects you to agree and feel grateful for the clarity. I didn't attend the conference, but I found all 14 hours of the speaker recordings online and watched them on my laptop at the kitchen table over the following 3 weeks. During school hours, with a spiral notebook open beside me, I took 46 pages of notes. I still have that notebook. It lives in the glove compartment of my car. The third example. In September of 2022, I asked Derek if I could set up a small home office space in the sunroom at the back of the house. A desk, a lamp, a monitor. He asked me what I planned to do in there. I said I was thinking about some freelance writing and consulting, something to keep my skills current. He looked at me for a moment and said, "The sunroom is storage, and I think you should focus on what you're already doing. The kids need you present. That's the job right now." He said it the way you close a file. Then he went back to what he was doing. I went out to the sunroom and I sat on a plastic storage bin and looked out at the backyard magnolia, and I thought, I am going to build something he cannot see and cannot touch and cannot qualify or dismiss, and when the time comes, I am going to let him find out from a document. The breaking point came on the 9th of February, 2023, a Thursday evening. I had made dinner, herb roasted chicken, sweet potato mash, a green salad with a dressing I made from scratch, from lemon and good olive oil. The children had eaten and gone upstairs. Derek came home at 7:17 in the evening. I heard the garage door and I noted the time on the microwave display. He came in carrying the distinct smell of the cologne he wore only for client dinners, which he had not mentioned having. He looked at the food on the stove. He poured water. He sat at the kitchen table and opened his phone. I sat across from him. I said, "Derek, I want to talk about something. While the kids are in school, I have 7 hours a day. I've been doing a serious amount of research on content strategy consulting for small businesses. Nashville has a specific gap right now. Boutique retail, hospitality, restaurants, small professional firms, none of them have dedicated marketing people. It's a real market. I have the skills. I want to start something part-time, from home in the school hours. I have a name, I have a plan, and I have 3 potential clients already identified." He looked up from his phone. He smiled. The particular smile I had learned to recognize over 11 years. The one that meant the outcome of this conversation was already settled in his mind and he was simply waiting for me to finish speaking. "Nadia," he said, "you haven't worked in 8 years. You're a stay-at-home mom. That's your job and it's a real job and there's nothing wrong with it. But who is going to hire you as a consultant? You have no current portfolio, no recent clients. You'd be trying to sell yourself in a market where everyone else has active experience. You'd be embarrassing yourself. And honestly, you'd be embarrassing me." He went back to his phone. The chicken sat cooling on the stove between us. I did not respond. I picked up my plate. I rinsed it at the sink. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed in the dark room, and stayed there for a long time. Cora's nightlight glowed amber under her door at the end of the hall. Felix's white noise machine hummed its steady, soft sound. The house was completely quiet. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just sat there. And I made a decision. Not a loud one. Not a dramatic one. A quiet one that settled into me like something fitting precisely into its correct place. I was going to build something he did not know existed. Not to wound him. Not to announce anything. I was going to build because I had a skill and I had 7 hours a day, and his opinion of my capabilities had, from that moment forward, permanently stopped being a variable I was willing to include in my calculations. He had removed himself from the equation. I let him stay removed. 3 days later, on the 12th of February, I called Margaret Okafor. I had found her through a women's business network 18 months earlier. I had her number in my phone for 7 months before I used it, which tells you something about the part of my mind that had already been quietly preparing the groundwork. I made an appointment. I drove to her office on Church Street on a Tuesday morning while the children were at school. I sat across her clean, organized desk in a building with a view of the Tennessee state capitol through the north window, and I told her everything, the entire 11 years. I laid it flat on her desk the way you lay down a completed puzzle that has taken a long time and finally shows you what it always was. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Tell me about the finances," she said. I told her about the joint account, the $300 monthly cash, the spending oversight, the pattern, the time he had made me return a $40 book I had ordered because it was not in the monthly budget for personal items, the time he had reviewed my grocery receipts line by line after a week in which I had spent $60 more than usual because Felix had been homesick for 4 days. She nodded steadily. When I was done, she said something I wrote in my notebook the moment I reached my car. "The 3 things you need are your own account, your own documented income, and your own paper trail. All 3. When you have all 3, call me." I drove home. I picked up the children. I made dinner. I put them to bed. At 10:41 that evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop while Derek slept upstairs, and I began. The first thing I did was register a limited liability company, Nadia V. Creative Consulting LLC, filed online on the 21st of February, 2023. The filing fee was $100. I paid it with a prepaid Visa card purchased at a pharmacy on a Tuesday morning when I was already out for groceries. I paid for the card with cash I had been setting aside for 5 weeks from grocery change, $4 and $5 at a time, kept in an envelope inside a folded winter sweater at the back of my closet. Derek had not opened that closet in 2 years. I knew this because the sweater was in the exact position I had placed it. I opened a business checking account at a bank branch in Brentwood that Derek had no association with. I opened it using a new email address I accessed only from my phone, which had a separate data plan I had added to my own account at a carrier store in Murfreesboro, 30 miles from our neighborhood, paid for in cash on a Saturday morning when Derek was on the golf course and the children were at my neighbor Dolores's house for a play date. I used a post office box in Antioch for all business correspondence. I paid for the box quarterly, in cash, from the business account once it was funded. I want to be specific about every step of this because I want you to understand precisely that nothing about what I built was accidental. It was patient. It was methodical. It was the work of someone who had 7 clear hours every school day and a very precise understanding of what was at stake. My first client was a woman named Bonnie Chastain, who owned a specialty kitchen and pantry shop on Gallatin Avenue called Salt and Gather. I had been in her store to buy olive oil the previous November and had noticed while I browsed that her Google business listing showed the wrong hours, that her Instagram account had not been updated in 3 months and had 1,100 followers, and that her website copy was written in a tone that sounded like a catalog rather than a shop you would want to visit. I had a business card in my bag at that moment, and I had not given it to her because I didn't have a business yet. In March, I went back. I gave her my card and I told her I wanted to try something for 30 days at no charge. I rewrote her website copy. I rebuilt her Google business profile. I created a content calendar for her social media and photographed her products on a Tuesday afternoon, using my phone and a piece of white poster board in her back room. I wrote her an 8-week email newsletter series. By the end of April, she had received 43 inquiries through her website, compared to 8 the previous month. She handed me a check for $900 and said, "What would it take to keep you?" That check was the first deposit into the Nadia V. Creative Consulting business account. I photographed it before I deposited it. The image is saved in a private album on my phone that I called proof. I want to tell you something true about the months that followed. Derek did not become crueler. He did not become more suspicious. He was exactly the same as he had always been, which is itself a kind of fact about a marriage. He came home, he ate dinner, he monitored spending, he gave me the monthly cash. He played golf on Saturday mornings and came home sunburned and satisfied. He attended Cora's spring concert and filmed it on his phone and sent the video to his mother, never mentioning that I had made Cora's dress by hand. He ordered a new set of golf clubs without discussing it with me. He told me the cost after the fact, and used the phrase, "I handled it," the way a person uses a phrase they have never examined. In July of 2023, Derek came home one evening and mentioned over dinner that Meridian Capital had brought in a consultant to redesign their digital marketing approach. "Paid some agency in Atlanta $45,000, he said, shaking his head. "For a new website and some social content. I don't know how these people justify those numbers." I passed the salad dressing without comment. One of my clients that month was a hotel in Germantown that had paid me $6,000 to rebuild their entire guest communication strategy, and had seen inquiry rates climb 31% in 6 weeks. I said nothing at the dinner table. I went upstairs later and invoiced a second client. In September of 2023, Cora came home from school and announced that she wanted to be an entrepreneur when she grew up, because her teacher had told the class that entrepreneurs were people who built things from scratch. "What does build from scratch mean, Mama?" she asked. I told her it meant starting with nothing and making something real. She nodded very seriously. I did not tell her that her mother had been doing exactly that for 6 months in the hours between school drop-off and school pickup. He had decided what I was. He had stopped watching. And what people don't understand about being underestimated is this: it is not only painful. It is, in the right hands, a profound strategic advantage. I worked every school day from 8:15 in the morning until 2:40 in the afternoon. I built a website for Nadia V. Creative consulting with a portfolio section populated with the Bonnie Chastain results and 2 pro bono projects I completed in March. I wrote detailed case studies for each. I joined the Founders Table, a women's business collective in Nashville, and attended their monthly meetings on Tuesday evenings, telling Derek I was at a book club. Through the Founders Table, I got referrals. Through referrals, I got clients. Through clients, I got results. Through results, I got more referrals. By June of 2023, I had 6 active clients: a boutique travel agency on Belmont Boulevard, a women's clothing boutique in the Nations, a family-owned Italian restaurant in Sylvan Park, a licensed therapist in private practice, a handmade jewelry designer transitioning from Etsy to her own branded site, and Bonnie Chastain, who had become a loyal, enthusiastic anchor client and who told every business owner she met about me. By September, I had 11 clients. My monthly revenue had crossed $14,000. By December 31st, 2023, the business account held $294,000. I had built that in 10 months, in a house where someone had told me, with complete confidence and zero malice, that I would embarrass myself. I hired a CPA named Donald Park, recommended through the Founders Table Network, in April of 2023. Donald filed my quarterly estimated taxes with the precision of a person who understood, without being told explicitly, that the paper trail was as important as the profit. Every invoice issued, every payment received, every deductible expense categorized and dated and kept. I paid myself a modest monthly salary of $1,200 drawn from the business account into my separate personal account. Enough to demonstrate legitimate business income, not enough to attract attention to a lifestyle change. Margaret and I met every 90 days. She drank black coffee and I drank tea, and she told me exactly where I stood legally and strategically, and I listened and asked precise questions and went home and continued to build. In February of 2024, she told me that the business had been sufficiently established, funded, and independently operated to qualify as separate property under Tennessee marital law, given the circumstances of its formation and the complete absence of marital funds in its capitalization or operation. "Keep building," she said, "and document everything." I kept building. I documented everything. It was in March of 2024 that my neighbor Dolores told me about a woman named Candace Reeves. Dolores had been at a wine bar in the Gulch on a Friday evening and had seen Derek at a corner table with a woman she did not recognize, and the way they sat together was not the way professional colleagues sit at the end of a workday. Dolores told me the following morning over coffee on her back porch, directly and without softening it, because she was the kind of woman who understood that honesty, delivered gently, is an act of profound respect. I thanked her. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway of the house on Estes Road for 9 minutes. Then I called Margaret. "Are you ready to file?" she said. I sat with the question for a count of 4. "Yes," I said. I was not destroyed by what I had learned. I want to be honest about this too, because I think the honest version is the one that matters. I had been emotionally disengaging from this marriage in slow, gradual increments for over 2 years. Not from bitterness, from clarity, from the accumulated weight of 11 years of invisible labor, $168 dinner debates, and a $425 conference I wasn't allowed to attend. The heart, when it is given enough evidence, makes its own quiet decisions before the formal paperwork arrives. By the time I learned about Candace, I was much further from the shore of that marriage than Derek had any idea. Derek was served the divorce papers on a Tuesday in April of 2024. He called me 4 times in the 2 hours that followed. Bewildered on the first call, controlled anger on the second, something softened and searching on the third. The 4th call I did not answer. I texted him one sentence: "Please contact Margaret Okafor's office for all communications." Then I drove to pick up the children from school and took them for frozen custard because it was a Tuesday and they did not need to know yet that everything was about to change. Winston Farrow's first formal communication arrived within the week. My financial contribution to the marriage, 0. My marketable skills after an 8-year employment gap, negligible. My reasonable entitlement, child support, and a modest division of the jointly held assets, calculated on the basis of my 0 independent earning capacity. Margaret read the letter aloud to me at our April meeting. I listened to every word without expression. Then I reached into my portfolio and slid a document across her desk. Face up. It was the Nadia V. Creative Consulting Financial Summary for fiscal year 2023, prepared by Donald Park, with a full audit trail attached. Margaret looked at the page. She looked at me. "Nadia," she said, "is every number on this page accurate?" "Every single one," I said. She set the page down. She folded her hands. And for the first time in all our many months of meetings, she smiled. Now, if you're still watching, I want to take a moment here, because I know something about who is watching this right now. You are someone who has been in a room where someone decided what you were and stopped watching. Maybe it wasn't a marriage. Maybe it was a family dinner table. Maybe it was a workplace. Maybe it was someone who handed you a label and walked away expecting you to wear it. If that's you, drop a comment below. Tell me one word for where you are in your story right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. Because what happens next is the part that, even now, I take a breath before I tell. The mediation session was scheduled for the 14th of August, 2024 at 9 o'clock in the morning, in a conference room on the 14th floor of an office building on Broadway in downtown Nashville. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Cumberland River. It was one of those brilliant late summer Nashville mornings when the overnight air had finally broken the humidity and the sky was a deep, specific blue that makes you feel, for no rational reason, that things are going to resolve in your favor. I noticed all of this. I was calm enough to notice. I arrived at 8:54. I wore a pale cream linen blazer, dark tailored trousers, and the small gold earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. I carried my leather portfolio and a coffee I had mostly finished on the walk from the parking garage. Margaret was already seated. She stood when I came in, placed her hand briefly on my forearm, and said nothing. That was sufficient. Derek arrived at 9:07. He entered with Winston Farrow, who wore a suit that communicated considerable professional confidence and carried the ease of a man who had prepared thoroughly for a room he expected to control. Derek did not make eye contact with me when he sat down. He arranged his documents. He spoke briefly and quietly to Winston. He was contained, prepared. He had the look of a man who has been told the outcome in advance and is simply waiting for the room to catch up. The mediator was a retired circuit court judge named Harold Crew. He was precise, measured, and entirely without warmth, which I found deeply reassuring in the way that clean instruments in a surgical tray are reassuring. He outlined the parameters of the session and the framework of Tennessee marital asset law. Winston presented Derek's position: the marital estate, our home in Green Hills, appraised at $1.4 million. 2 joint brokerage accounts totaling $311,000. Derek's Meridian Capital Retirement Fund. The joint checking account balance. What I was entitled to in Winston's framing: child support, an equitable share of the documented joint assets, and nothing further. Given my history of non-earning and the absence of any independent financial contribution, Winston stacked his papers neatly. He looked at Margaret with the polished patience of a man already composing the summary email in his head. Margaret let a full beat of silence pass. Then she opened her portfolio and placed a document face up in front of Harold Crew. She placed a second copy in front of Winston. She laid a third on the table between herself and Derek. "This," she said, "is a certified financial disclosure for Nadia V. Creative Consulting, LLC, a Tennessee limited liability company, wholly owned by my client, Nadia Voss, established in February of 2023. The document contains certified bank statements, audited financial records for fiscal years 2023 and 2024 through the date of filing, and a full attestation from a licensed CPA in the state of Tennessee." Harold Crew put on his reading glasses. The room was very quiet. Winston picked up his copy. He turned the first page, then the second, then the third. I watched his face with the same calm attention I might give a window in a thunderstorm. He was a skilled attorney, and he was working very hard to control his expression, but he was processing information he had not been given, and information of that specific kind has a way of moving through a face whether you permit it to or not. Derek picked up his copy. He turned the first page, and then he looked up, and he looked at me. Really looked at me. Not the way he had looked at me across dinner tables or in the car on the way to school pickup. The way a person looks at you when they understand, fully and suddenly, that they did not know you the way they believed they did. I held his gaze. I said nothing. Harold Crew set the document down and removed his reading glasses. He looked at Margaret. He looked at Winston. He made a brief note. "Counsel," he said to Margaret, "let me confirm for the record. The business account balance as of the date of filing reflects $847,000. "That is correct," Margaret said. "And current monthly recurring revenue for the business, $43,200. Monthly, recurring." Harold Crew nodded. He made a second note. He set his pen parallel to his notepad with the precision of a man who has never been careless in his professional life. Then he looked toward Derek's side of the table. "Mr. Voss," he said, "do you have any questions about the authenticity or the content of this disclosure?" Derek looked at Winston. Winston gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. "No," Derek said. His voice was flat, the particular flat of a room after a sound has left it. "Then we will proceed on the basis of full financial disclosure," Harold Crew said. He picked up his pen. 2 hours and 31 minutes of detailed legal process followed, which I will spare you in its entirety. The business was classified as separate property on the basis of its independent formation, its separately maintained capitalization, and the complete absence of marital funds in its establishment or operation. The marital home and joint assets were subject to equitable distribution under Tennessee law. Derek's retirement account was divided. Child support for Cora and Felix was formally established, and in recognition of my independently developed and fully documented earning capacity, the overall settlement reflected a division that Margaret and I considered accurate and fair. not generous. Fair. I had never wanted anything beyond fair. Fairness was the whole point. In the corridor outside the conference room, Winston walked past us without speaking. Derek stopped 3 feet from me. He looked at the floor for a moment, then he looked at me. "You built all of that," he said. It was not a question. "I built all of that," I said. He stood there. He was looking at me the way people look at something when they are trying to understand how they could have stood next to it for so long without seeing it. "When?" he said. "While you were at dinner," I said. I walked to the elevator. Margaret walked beside me. We did not speak until we were in the lobby, where the air conditioning made the September air feel cool and still. She looked at me. "How are you feeling?" she said. "Clear," I said, and that was the exact, precise word for it. Not victorious, not even relieved. Clear, the way a window feels after rain. The divorce was finalized on a Friday in October of 2024. I picked Cora and Felix up from school that afternoon, and we drove to a bakery on Fatherland Street in East Nashville that makes the best chocolate croissants in the city. Cora had 1.5, Felix had 2, and then negotiated loudly for a third, and I said no, and he accepted this with the philosophical equanimity of a 7-year-old who is fundamentally secure in the world. I had a single croissant and a black coffee, and I sat at the window table and watched my children and felt something I can only describe as solid. Not triumphant. Not even particularly happy in the loud sense of the word. Just solid. As if I had finally put both feet on ground that was my own and felt it hold. Derek texted me 3 times in the weeks after the mediation. The first message said, "I owe you an apology and I want to give it to you in person." The second said, "I wasn't fair to you. I know that now. Can we please talk?" The third said, "I said things in that room that I am ashamed of. Please." I forwarded all 3 messages to Margaret and asked her to handle all communication through the agreed channels. I want to be very precise about what that decision was and was not, because I think precision matters here more than anywhere else in this story. Declining to receive an apology through the informal channel someone prefers is not the refusal of forgiveness. It is not cruelty or coldness or the performance of a grudge. It is simply the understanding that you do not have to extend your attention and your grace on the schedule that someone else has decided is convenient for them, especially if that person spent 11 years making it very clear that your attention had no particular value. Forgiveness, if it comes on terms you choose, not terms handed to you in a text message at 11 o'clock at night. Derek and I have a co-parenting arrangement. The children go to him every other weekend and on Thursday evenings. He is civil in these exchanges, sometimes almost warm. He has never again used the word nothing in a way directed at me. He once, dropping off Felix on a January evening, asked how the business was going. I told him it was going well. He said, "Good." He left. That is sufficient. I am not interested in his regret, but I am deeply interested in what my children observe. I want Cora and Felix to grow up watching a woman who ended a chapter of her life with composure and dignity and did not perform the grievance of it in front of them. I want Cora, specifically, to understand this. You can spend years in a room where someone has decided who you are, and you can choose not to argue with that decision. And you can quietly go build something that speaks for itself when the moment comes. That is not weakness. That is the most precise and powerful form of patience there is. Nadia V. Creative Consulting, LLC. Currently has 26 active clients. I have 3 part-time contractors, all women I connected with through the Founders Table network, and a 4th we are currently onboarding. Our combined revenue for the first half of 2025 exceeded $261,000. I have a small office in the nation's neighborhood of Nashville, in a building on 51st Avenue where the windows face west, and in the evenings the light comes in long and golden and warm across my desk. I have a business attorney and a CPA and a business coach I meet with monthly over coffee. I have a team and a pipeline and a calendar full of work I am good at and that I chose. Cora is now 9 years old. She has decided that when she grows up she wants to design roller coasters, which is specific and ambitious and entirely characteristic of her. Felix is 7 and is committed simultaneously to becoming a chef and a professional soccer player, which I have told him are not mutually exclusive. I pick them up from school on the days they are with me, and I take them for ice cream on ordinary Tuesdays for no particular reason, and I sit across from them at dinner and I ask them what they learned, and I listen to every word of the answer. I do not look at my phone during dinner. I made that rule for myself the week the divorce was finalized, and I have not broken it once. On the wall of my office, I have one framed print. It is a photograph of the Cumberland River at sunrise. I bought it at a gallery 3 months after the divorce was finalized. It is not the same print that hung crooked on the wall of that conference room on the 14th floor. But every time I look at it, I think of that room, and I think of what it felt like to sit with perfect stillness while someone called you nothing, knowing that in 48 hours a certified document was going to walk into that room and answer for you. I want to speak to you directly now, you specifically, because I believe some of you watching this are not in a marriage like mine was. You are in a family where someone's voice has always been louder than yours. A workplace where your contributions are accepted and your credit is not. A friendship or partnership where someone has drawn the map of who you are allowed to be and handed it to you with the expectation that you will use it. And you have been living inside someone else's definition of you for so long that you have started, on certain days, to believe it might be accurate. I want to tell you one thing. The most powerful decision I made in this entire story was not registering the LLC. It was not opening the business account, or hiring the CPA, or attending the founder's table, or taking on Bonnie Chastain as my first client. The most powerful decision I made was private and internal and took approximately 4 seconds. It was the decision, sitting in the dark on the edge of my bed on the 9th of February, 2023, that Derek's opinion of what I was capable of was no longer a variable I would allow into my equation. I did not argue with him. I did not try to convince him. I did not wait for his belief in order to justify my own. I went quiet. I went to work. I built in the hours he wasn't watching. I let time do what time does when you give it something real to work with. And I let the numbers walk into the room when the room was ready. This is what I believe about the women who come back quietly. They don't come back angry. They don't come back with speeches prepared. They come back composed, with documentation, with a certified bank statement and a CPA attestation. And they sit still while a retired judge removes his reading glasses and the other side of the room goes pale. That was the moment I stopped being a stay-at-home nobody and started becoming something I can only describe as completely, quietly, entirely myself. Before I close, I want to ask you something. Leave your answer in the comments below. Have you ever had someone tell you, in words or in the absence of words, exactly what you were not capable of? And have you found a way to answer that without using a single one of your own? I want to know, not because I have anything particular to teach you, but because I believe we need to hear each other say, the silence was not emptiness. The silence was the work. To everyone who stayed with this story from the first word to the last, I want to say something that I mean with every part of me. You could have clicked away a dozen times and you didn't. That choice, that generosity of your time and your attention, is the reason these stories exist and the reason they keep being told. Every comment you leave reminds another woman watching that she is not alone. Every subscription means the next story reaches someone who needs it. Every share sends this to the inbox of a woman who is right now sitting on the edge of her bed in the dark, deciding. There is something quietly miraculous about a community of people who choose to witness each other's stories. You are that community. You have been from the very first comment. If you haven't subscribed to Revenge Chronicles yet, please do it right now. We release a new story every single week, and every single one is another woman who built something in silence while the world looked the other way. The loudest comebacks always are. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next week.